Welcome to another broadcast of the Deborah Ruffini Show on the Artist First Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at artistfirst.com. And now, from England, here she is, your host, Deborah Ruffini.
Greetings from England. This is Deborah Ruffini with another broadcast of the Deborah Ruffini Show. Today, it's just, as of last time, it's just me, myself and I. Not really a continuation from the last broadcast, but exploring part of what was covered. The aspect of bullying and observing bullying behaviour and sort of where it comes from and root causes, possible root causes behind the need to bully. As you know, I've done a fair few broadcasts on this because it is a topic that is of importance. Most people at some point have received bullying, especially I think in light of since the internet has come about, it's made it easier for people to do this, and it's very, very sad, very upsetting, and it's easy, isn't it, when, people like you and I, I'm sure, wouldn't, but I think it's easy for a lot of people who have a bullying tendency to sort of be, they call them keyboard warriors. But yeah, it's been something that I've been sort of recently discussing with friends, and most of my friends are roughly my sort of age and older, and I think we've been talking about, it's almost like the older we become, not that we get to be grumpy old man or grumpy old woman, but it's almost like the more of life's experiences that you've had, the more situations you've had that haven't been particularly kind or very nice, the more aware you are of what you're prepared or not prepared to tolerate, I think. And I think it's a bit like a balloon being blown up, isn't it? You start off where just a little bit, a few puffs, and then further things happen, and in the end the balloon sort of, you give one too many puffs and it eventually bursts. I haven't burst yet, but yet. I hope I won't, but I think the older we get, the more things have happened, because that's what happens in life. More experiences we go through, more injustice we witness either firsthand, or we see it all around us, and we feel for things happening to our friends and family, and it's something we've all been through. But I've just been thinking about why do people feel the need to bully the victim, someone who's already. So what I mean by that is, it's one thing to it's still not okay, it's still absolutely unacceptable to pick on someone and target them, but it's when a person already knows. I don't like the word victim, but I think I prefer to say survivor, but it's a mixture of both, I think. You're a survivor providing things haven't got to you and you end up crumbling. But which of course is easy to do. But I think it's when people know that someone's already gone through something, and it's almost like they rub their hands with glee and think, oh, brilliant, this is an ideal opportunity to attack that person even further. So it's kind of, how am I trying to say this? But it's people who fail to recognise either their own bad behaviour or that bad behaviour of someone else, but the one on the receiving end of that bad behaviour is in the wrong when they speak up. And I think I touched on that last time with reading out the speaking of the scenario with the police and the report, going through it step by step. I mean, it sort of incorporated that. The wonderful, amazing Nancy Little comes to mind, in that she's been a former guest of, I think, 3 or 4 times, and she was sexually abused by her mother from a very early age. Now, we know, unquestionably, anyone with an ounce of conscience knows that's something we call wrong. It's not okay. But even she's been targeted online. I mean, she's done some talks about what's happened to her, and they've been on YouTube, and even some of the comments have been really surprising. You know, it's not surprising with we know it happens. Shocking, really shocking comments, saying things like, "This never really happened," or what else has she had? Oh, I think she's had something along the lines of, "Why do you feel the need to talk about it? Why are you talking about it? Why?" A bit like what the police said to me. It happened a long time ago. Why do you need to talk about it? And you think, what is wrong with the mindset of someone who can listen to a woman that's required a huge amount of surgery due to the neglect of her mum, had to suffer in adulthood for what happened? How on earth can someone listen to the shocking things that this poor lady has been through and then just leap online and, "I need to attack even further"? It makes you wonder what happened to these people in order for what, you know, where has that need come from? Why do they need to do something so cruel? Is it a mixture of power trip? Is it purely for the purpose of being unkind? Is it fulfilling a need in them by a triggering of something they've been through themselves? At this point, I want to read a message that was left for me with regard to my talk that I did last month on police misconduct. And so, bearing in mind, I've read through the report of the comments that were left and my responses to things that just couldn't have been true, were completely illogical. And again, so this person has listened to this broadcast and left this comment. Now, this is really interesting because we're going to break down this comment. Again, the motive. Where is the mindset? As with Nancy Little, where is the mindset of the person? Where does the heart lie? What is their motive for leaving such a comment? So this comment, I won't name the person. I don't know who this person is. Starts by saying, "Your account is rambling and difficult to follow." So they initially start by having to say, "You haven't made a very good job of how you've come across. Maybe I've got a stutter. Maybe I've got a speech impediment. There could be reasons. Maybe I do ramble. I've been told that I speak quite fast, so, try. But it's the fact that this person starts off by putting down the way in which I've come across. So they feel the need to do that. Most importantly, telling domestic abuse victims, especially those subjected to physical violence, not to call the police would be incredibly irresponsible and would put lives at risk. I sort of get that. Let's look at that again. Most importantly, telling... Okay, but they're not listening to what I've said or considering where I've come from. As a self-described advocate for DA, that's domestic abuse victims, I would hope that you would put your own prejudices aside and not play fast and loose with other people's safety. Now, I assume by that, and instantly I'm just using this as this is a perfect example of an internet. I mean, this isn't a particularly cruel internet troll. This is sort of like a midway internet troll, but nevertheless, we're concentrating on the need to do this. So this person saying, I hope that you would put your own prejudices aside. Now, I like to think that I was clear in the last broadcast that I don't think all police officers are bad eggs, but I do think that many, don't know the statistics, I wouldn't have a clue, but I mean, and I can only speak for what I know about UK police, but there is, and it's been rife on the news lately, you know, there's been an awful lot of things coming out and quite disturbing things. It's been flooding the papers. Again, that's not to say that each and every one is bad, but I think sometimes good people can be made to do bad things by their profession. And, you know, I apologise if I wasn't clear about that in last month's broadcast, but that's where my heart lies anyway. That's what I believe. But it's not my own prejudice. So we don't wake up one morning and think, right, I'm going to have it in for a certain kind. Well, some people would. But in my case, I haven't woken up thinking, I'm going to have a go about all police. They're all this, they're all that. But if you've had an experience that's been negative at the hands of a particular person in a particular role, then, you know, it's not that you've got it in for them all, but you're not going to feel safe and you're not going to think favourably of how that operation works, where, from what I understand, I do understand that certainly in the UK police force that they're pretty much told to not admit to fault, and it's got to be, you know, we've got to have the sergeant covering for the officer, we've got to have the professional standards covering for the sergeant and the officer, and the IOPC covering for the, so they're all covered pretty much. I do apologise, there's some noise going on there. Incidentally, it was fireworks night last night, so if you hear some bangs, it's we celebrate this tradition of November the 5th, where you know, we celebrate the death of an innocent person, Guy Fawkes. So innocent in that he didn't carry out his crime, but going back to what we're talking about. No, Guy Fawkes wasn't a good egg. We won't go there. But so yes. So going back to the message, I would hope that you'd put your own prejudice aside and not play fast and loose with other people's safety. So we don't get, unless we are mean, we don't have, you know, I don't like the word prejudice because it's almost like you have it in for someone without any reason. So, but with my situation, it's obviously not acceptable with the way things have been dealt with, because, you know, to put lies on a report, to falsely accuse someone and then to run away when that person's trying to communicate with you is what we call bullying. So it's not a prejudice, it's stating something that was not acceptable. Perhaps consider joining the police or being a special constable and show all these supposedly terrible officers how you believe it should be done. And no, I am not a police officer. That's how the message finishes. So this is really interesting because this person has felt the need to not listen to what I've actually said, but listen to what they've made up their mind to be what I'm saying. And the way it finishes, and no, I'm not a police officer, so they have judged my heart that I'm going to be reading the message as if it is. So it's full of judgment in whatever way. It's judging that this would never happen, a bit like Nancy Little was told about it. A mother would never do that to her child, and then judging that I'm going to be reading it as if it's from a police. So this is just an example of, as soon as I read that message, I mean, it wasn't terribly upsetting, I didn't lose any sleep over it, but it's the fact that it just prompted me to do another show about, we've covered bullying, we've covered narcissistic personality disorder, but it's just looking into what is it with people that they need to do this. We can disagree on something, but without being unkind, and I think it's this whole thing about needing to troll. Most people, if they say something which may have come out the wrong way, they're sort of quick to rectify how it was intended, and they feel awful in the event of doing so. It's that some people, I think they take a delight in offending and being unkind and rude, which of course, as I said, is rife on the internet. And it provides that perfect opportunity, because you can, again, you can hide behind your keyboard and remain anonymous. I think one area of bullying that amazes me is this whole business of, if you speak about how horrible I've been, I'll sue, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. The meanness is okay, but the wrongdoing is you expressing what I've done. I think that's at the heart of most bullies. I think that's how they operate, that they just, they just see that, they just look at the outcome rather than the first cause. And if you think about it, if to be rude is a natural part of one's nature, then the other person's response is going to be the problem in their eyes. And again, it's up to that first person to kind of sort it out, but it's up to them for them to address their own behaviour and their actions, rather than, you can't whack someone over the head with a shovel and then complain that person's got to go to hospital. It doesn't work like that. Again, I think, as I say with the situation that I've been through quite recently with the police, we can fully accuse this person, but by the lies of a stranger whom we wish to take the side of, and we can lie on the report to cover for the officer who handled the situation appallingly, and blank out areas in the recording of that phone call so that they won't get into trouble. Very sad. Not the end of the world, but it's upsetting. I think it's upsetting when there's any sort of injustice where you're sort of, banging on the window and they put the blinds down. It's just not nice. It's not kind, and nothing gets sorted with that. And I don't want to go over old ground really, but it's almost like we need for the person we've accused to not notice what we've done. Otherwise, she's in the wrong for our slip-ups and lies, for mentioning the slip-ups and lies, rather. It's a very difficult one, because you can't reason with such people, and so you're just left kind of trying to deal with it on your own, really. You can have support of friends and people around you, but the real people you need to, the real people that you want to talk to about it is it's just impossible. You just can't go anywhere. And I was thinking of a program. It was a sitcom we had over here in the UK, possibly about 20. It was in the 90s. Excuse me. It was called One Foot in the Grave, and One Foot in the Grave is, if you can get hold of it, I strongly suggest you watch it. They made about, 8 or so series. It's very, very funny, and it's about an elderly couple called Victor and Margaret Maldrew. And a lot of people who aren't familiar with it, they just think it's a miserable old man with a catchphrase of "I don't believe it," but he's not. He's actually not a miserable old man. I actually love Victor, and I could have married Victor Maldrew. As I've got older, I've sort of become him. He's kind of become my role model, and yeah, it's basically the sitcom is Victor and Margaret living at home, and it's just one thing after another. It's one injustice after the next taking place, where they're all things that could really happen, but it's just that the chances of these things happening to this couple is just so so remote. But he's very good at, I don't like to say revenge, but giving taste of own medicine. And there's one episode that I watched quite recently where there's a car that's sort of, I think it's cutting him up or something, driving too closely, or something anyway. It's something on that, and he's beeping this old man, And Victor takes a note of, it's a company car. I think it's something like double glazing or something like that. And so Victor takes a note of the number of this man's company, and he calls the man to come round to his house for to give a quote on the, like I say, it's the windows, double glazing. And the man comes round and he spends a good half hour or so, trying to sell Victor the product, and Victor's acting really interested, and he's got a little that shows how old it is. It's like a the old dictaphones, that little recorders, and he presses the record and says, "Memo, could you please arrange for Samantha to arrange a estimate for Mr. Maldrew, etc., etc." And so Victor's all smiley, and the salesman is being very charming, like salesman. I said, "Oh, love the wallpaper, Mr. Maldrew. What a wonderful house you have here." And Victor's smiling, and he said, "I just need a small cheque for the sum of £400. If that's no problem," Victor says. And so he writes this cheque and gives it to the man, and he looks puzzled, and he says, "What is this?" And he's written, I won't use the language, but he's written, Victor's written, "Dawdling old something." And he reads this out on the cheque, and Victor says, I think that's what you called me, wasn't it, when you cut me up the other day?" And I think lots of people love that programme, because we can all identify with being Victor, in that, here you've got the wrong thing. The wrong thing is the man cutting him up and shouting out an obscenity to an old person, and then lovely Mr. M takes the liberty of getting the number, calling him round, and he basically says, I just called you round to waste your time. And then he picks up the dictaphone and he presses record. Memo, could you please arrange for Samantha to get me a new brain and to learn how to drive properly and all this sort of thing. But anyway, that's just an example. I just wanted to share that because One Foot in the Grave is a very funny programme, and I think as we get older and braver, we can become more Victor-like, and he has a strong sense of justice. How he just it's full of situations like that where he sees something that it's very clever. It's things that we all recognise are wrong or harming someone else, and he sort of steps in. He's basically like a superhero. He will step in to sort it out on behalf. He's got a strong sense of justice. He's got a strong sense of what's right and wrong, and he just sort of springs into action, really. And I remember it was a few Christmases ago, Christmas time. I think we're all anxious and we're all trying to buy things that are on the list, and it's a very stressful time, and the town centre is crowded and people everywhere. And I remember feeling quite tired and thinking, I'm going to stop for a break to have a quick coffee in Burger King. And so exhausted, I sit down with my coffee, and I'm just looking at my list, and there's these 3 kids of little boys of I don't know, 10, 11, something like that, and they're just running around Burger King with pea shooters, and they're just pea shooting everyone. They're just running around the staff, they're pea shooting the staff, they're pea shooting everyone sat down. There were some old people sat down, there were some young studenty people sat down, and they were just running riot. And I'm sitting there thinking, why are we all just putting our heads in the sand to this and just letting it happen? And I thought, but this isn't okay. I was just watching them do it, and one of them hit an old lady sort of on the shoulder, and I thought, why are we just... They're only little boys. They're only 3 kids of, like I say, 10 or 11. How have they got this power over everyone in Burger King, where we're just... No one's wanting to get involved. No one's wanting to do anything. And probably because I was tired and I hadn't got much on my list at that point. And I remember standing up and just sort of ordering them to get out of the shop. And I grabbed hold of one of them, and I don't think I should have done that. I didn't do anything to him. But I grabbed hold of him because I opened the door and I said, right, get out. I may have said something a bit stronger, I can't remember, but I just had to do something. Otherwise, they're not necessarily ruining everyone's day, but they're creating an unpleasant situation for people who just want to go in there, have a coffee like I was doing, people who want to go in there with their friends, have a chat. And these 3 kids were just going out of their way to ruin people's... It's hardly the highlight of a day, is it, going to Burger King? But they were ruining people's time in that place. And I just thought, something had to be done. And then I felt a bit sort of... Yeah, mean people have a good way of making us feel guilty, because then when I sat down, I realised I was shaken up, and I thought, oh, should I have done that? I thought, well, no, you have to do something. You can't just allow these things to happen. People, that's the whole thing, isn't it? People just doing nothing just allows the bully to flourish. And I think sometimes people of all ages can bully strangers because there's no real emotional attachment and no reason to feel remorse. I'm sure that person who left that message, even though that message that I've read wasn't cruel, but breaking it down, you can tell the motive for why that was left. It wasn't left to converse, it was left purely to attack rather than respond. And it wasn't the most vile thing, but it certainly wasn't kind. And I think if I'd known that person, or even if I had met that person in a queue in a shop and made a joke about, I don't know, something that we were paying for, that person, had they been even slightly familiar with me, they wouldn't have spoken to me like that. And it's interesting, isn't it, how, and you see it on Facebook all the time, there's a war breaking out over, I don't know, a post about flower arranging, or I'm just making that up, but something really inoffensive, and you get laughing emojis over serious posts, quite often with no attached comment. So you think, the reason someone's put just a laughing emoji over a serious post, again, why would you do that? It's to just leap on and prod someone. That's really what it's doing. But and again, as I say, I think if rudeness and manipulation is just, for some people, it is just part of their makeup, I think. I'm not saying it's okay, but I think there are some people who are there's some people who are straight talking. Straight talking is one thing, but then there's some people who just seem to, it's either a constant picking holes or putting someone down, or you see it a lot. Quite often it's in the name of humour, and we can all tease people gently, but I think when something becomes reliant on constant teasing or constant mockery, putting someone down, then it's like, where's this really coming from? Is it coming from a place of hurt? Is it coming from a place of insecurity? Yeah, and again, the other person who's been affected, the other person reacting, is the person who's the problem, oversensitive. They're the problem, they're the person who's the issue. It's all very strange and twisted. I remember once seeing a meme with a photo of a man saying to his partner, honey, it really upsets me when you mention the upsetting things that I've done to you. And it's so true that, there really are people like that. And it's, again, what can be done with such a person? And from what I've understood by a couple of former guests, and just the more people I speak to who, have experienced this or are knowledgeable in the field, apparently some counsellors or psychotherapists don't take on manipulators because the manipulator tries to manipulate the person trying to help them. And again, it's the whole thing, isn't it, of whatever a situation, that if you, in order to receive therapy, you need to have an admittance to something being wrong, and admitting that you need help. And if you think about it, it's quite true. I mean, how is it supposed to work if you don't realise there's a problem? Let's say, like with, alcoholism or any sort of addiction. I think the first point is to admit there's a problem. You can't really work on anything, or nothing can be worked on unless there's that first reaching out, acknowledging that you need help. And I think also if perhaps being mean is part of an addictive personality as well. To, if that's the only way you know how to speak to people, then how do you begin to acknowledge that needs addressing if that's just part of your makeup? And we quite often hear people say, "Oh, don't worry, that's just so and so. That's just how she is. That's just how he is." And you think, well, that may well be, but that doesn't mean it's okay. If you've got someone burgling a house, and well, don't worry, that's just what they do. It doesn't mean it's okay. And I think sometimes in life we can be in acceptance of a lot more than what we should be in acceptance of. And sometimes I think I've mentioned in previous shows that it can take time to realise that something isn't okay. Or we can look at, what is normal? I guess it's the whole thing, what is normal? But I think sometimes we can look at other people's surroundings to see that what we exist in is not okay, when we've just thought that's just part of how that person is after all. And sometimes it takes someone to come up to us and say, well, have you ever considered that this is not okay? How would you be if a friend came to you and said, this is happening to me? And sometimes then you can think, oh, hang on a minute, yeah, that's true. How would I feel if I was on the outside looking in? When we're in the situation, that can be our normality. That can be the only thing we can see. But it's I think it's bad enough when you have this bit. There's like an added layer. It's bad. Sorry, what I'm trying to say is it's bad enough when one is treated unkindly and with disrespect, but I think there's like an added layer to bullying when the reaction to that bullying is, what's the problem? There's a difference, isn't there, between it's like double whammy, I think. If there's a difference between, on the spur of the moment, being mean, which none of us like to be, but sort of having a conscience about it, where one is able to provide apology and look at their own behaviour. I think there's a difference between being unkind and then thinking, oh my goodness, what have I done? Recognising that. There's a difference between that and doing it because that's just how I am, and you have to accept it because I'm not going to change. I think there's a huge... We've all had people snap at us. I'm sure I've snapped at the boys in Burger King in my own way, but I think your average decent person feels remorse when they've been unkind, and I think that's the difference, really. Do we feel remorse, or do we just think this is part of my behaviour, so therefore suck it up? I have a lovely Facebook friend, and she often puts she'll put a smiley face or something, or and she writes, "Don't allow anyone to steal your joy. Don't allow nobody to steal your joy. Nobody." And I like that. And I think that's my message to anyone listening, really, is life is short. and I look back on my life and I think, my goodness, again, life's experiences take us to be the person that we are at any given time. But I think if only I dealt with things differently, if only I had defended myself more effectively, if only I had, if only, we can all say that. But if only I'd been tougher, firmer, not mean, but assertive, more firm in the face of cruelty and injustice, then I probably would have saved myself from a lot of grief in the last possibly couple of decades. But I like that. Don't allow anybody to steal your joy. And I think that's something we need to put on our mirrors, to encourage self-love and, positive attitude, and basically putting our hand up to no, not today, not any day. You are not stealing my joy. But don't allow anybody to steal your joy. And I shall wake up tomorrow with that attitude. And I can't encourage you guys enough to either. Don't allow anybody to steal your joy. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. And until next time, much love, God bless, and stay protected.